So still talking about internal considering, and I wanted to touch on something that you talked just now, the previous episode, that we can't just stop inner considering. We can't just stop being lost in daydreaming. We can't just decide to stop lying and being inauthentic. It's not possible. Why? Because that one that decides, says, okay, I'm done with this, that's just another I that is going to go away. And that's not the real I, and consciousness is not awake enough. And then one falls asleep, one is asleep, and then in sleep, that's what happens, So I remember Gurdjieff was saying when people encounter this work, there is a tendency to, as you notice certain things, the more you observe yourself, you notice wrongdoings, or you notice the wrong work of centers, or you notice things that are not nice about oneself. You are horrified. You can see manifestation about oneself that are painful to watch, or we see they're not helping me, are not serving me. Anyway, so then justifiably we are like rushing into doing something. Oh, I got to stop this. I need to, work on this to stop that. So, and Gurdjieff was cautioning, like, it doesn't work like that. We are a very complex biocomputer, the most complex biocomputer, much more sophisticated than a Swiss watch or a computer. So just like with a Swiss watch or a computer, you can't just go in there and try to change something. You need to know everything about the mechanism. You need to know everything about it in order for potentially changing something. Because if you just go in there and change something, it's all connected with something else. So anyway, it doesn't quite work. So the way to go is that the first step and the second step and the third step for a long time is to just observe. Just observe that manifestation. Just observe that inner considering. Not even call it inner considering, and observe this inner considering in myself as if it's a special type of creature, rare creature. And I'm a well-paid, the attitude is to, like, I'm a well-paid scientist who is about to write a detailed research project on this creature. So I don't want to mess with the creature, just observing without trying to get rid of it, change it, just get more information. That's how we start. Yeah. And also another, we just need to watch for a long time. Many things diminish just by watching them, as there's been also proved in science. Mm-hmm. Presence of the witness observer changes the phenomena. Also, what's important is to watch for this thing, to judge what we observe. There's a tendency to judge or be upset about what we observe in ourselves. The more conscious we are, we observe inner lies, inner contradictions, hurtful behavior towards oneself or towards others, selfishness, all this stuff. And a tendency to be like, oh God, oh God, I still have this. Oh man, you are so asleep, or you're so selfish. Yeah, now that is tricky because we observed it and then we identify with this judgment. Yeah, so it's important to know that, to be informed about that, and to cultivate and train oneself to observe this so-called sleep, to wrongdoing, with a non-judgmental attitude, to observe oneself as a curious, interesting stranger, without beating oneself up. However, if there are such tendencies to observe something and then beat oneself up or self-pity about it, it's important now to observe that too. Yeah, so keep coming back as that which is aware, and not take the bait of some voice in us, a voice, a thought, or something. Yeah, so if you And if what I'm saying now has stirred in you any association, or also along the lines of what would be practical work around inner considering.
Well, I was really touched by what it sounded so true when you were saying, just observe. And this is interesting. If we could completely just observe without identifying with any of these things we're talking about, that would be the most powerful antidote, the most powerful solvent. And these things would, of their own accord, start to dissipate, to disappear. But as you also saying, Mihai, and this speaks to what some people would call the progressive way, which some people say, well, the fourth way is the progressive way versus the direct path. Direct path might suggest, you know what? Boom, I'm out of inner considering. I'll never inner consider again. It's done because now consciousness is fully manifesting and it's taking care of all my functions and all my centers and everything else. I don't have an ego anymore. I'm resting in oneness and so forth. And again, I want to say I'm not belittling that at all. Not for an instant, because that is powerful and true in some cases. However, what the fourth way teaches is we experienced moments where we're less identified and then moments where we're more identified again. We're more inner considering today than yesterday in the same situation, a little less. There are degrees. Things fluctuate. We go up and down. Suddenly you're able to remember yourself, and then you see things about yourself with great clarity. And now you understand, yes, I see where I'm trying to go with this work, and I see more into my true nature, and I see where my false personality, my imaginary picture myself, it ruled me in that situation, and it's so clear, and understanding seems to fill us up. And then 3 hours later or 2 days later, it's gone. We're back in the situation and we're kind of confused and irritated and inner considering and negative and what's going on? The weird thing is, if we could also just observe both of those conditions, what was seeing both is what we're really after. Is this pure consciousness that notices what's going on in us. Sometimes we're in a more clear state, a clear condition of being. Sometimes we're more in the dark, identified, confused, whatever. And so this power of observation, the power of observation is, what's the word I'm looking for? Undervalued, understated.
Yeah. It's interesting. Even I was studying with a non-dual direct path teacher who I respect, and is going for the gold, like just understand and see that which is aware, that you have no evidence that which is aware is limited. Just see that and see and understand that which is aware is already here and you already that. So focusing on such things. And I came to him and I was like, hey, yeah, but I have this shit. I have this pattern, relational pattern. And it's bad. It hurts people. And like, what to do about it? I get this about I get this about that I am that which is aware, and that is may not be personal. But what to do about this pattern? And I was a little bit like, tell me, teacher. And it's interesting because they said kind of the same thing that you said. So the teacher said, well, I'll tell you what to do about this pattern. And I was really waiting to tell me. And he said, well, I recommend you just watch these tendencies and you will see as they will diminish in front of you. And that's it. That's the only thing you need to do. Which, there's lots of truth in that. ultimate truth. There's lots of truth in that somehow, but that was not very, I needed to do other things.
Mhm.
I needed to go into that pattern, and there was so thick and so much unconsciousness in there, so much, the players who were, they were subconscious. So I didn't have, I first need to find a way to make it more conscious, that particular pattern, and explore it. So yeah, I discovered that it's not enough to be aware of something, because some of that something is really hidden from you, or it's too hot and we can't be aware of it. We are not able to, and we bounce out, or we stick to it, or we resist it. So sometimes one needs to do some different type of investigative work, which is still involves awareness. It's still aware, but getting there to pry it open more, and like I would say, somatic processing from awareness, various techniques that, yeah. But
Also, it reminds me that this is why my observation, my experience, my perception, my insight is that what is called the progressive way and what is called the direct path, they each contain elements of the other. They actually do, because otherwise you could go to satsang and then that's it. You're done. You say you got it, then go home and never come back. You don't need to come back. But and in the fourth way, we have glimpses. We have periods where more awake and then less awake, more asleep, less asleep. And we're watching this weather go through us. On different days it's sunny, or on other days it's cloudier. And then, so the idea is how to find our way up above the clouds more regularly, more often, with more understanding. So it's not, they don't, it's funny, they're not exclusive. Dualism means exclusivity, one thing excluding another. There are now two things. There's a direct path and a progressive path. Actually, there's one, they're all one. They are different ways of looking at the same thing. I'm speaking from my experience, as I say. And I don't know. I've never asked a non-dual master, someone who's presumably fully conscious, what they would say about this. So I can't speak for them.
yeah,
I can just say, this is another beauty of the fourth way. It talks about something called scale and relativity. Everything's connected. And when the more conscious you become, the more you see everything's connected. And this idea of oneness, of unity, things are not, they don't contradict, they don't oppose, they don't exclude. Everything fits together. Everything is one, part of one, and depends on where you stand, where you're looking. And then, well, that's, I'm having all sorts of thoughts about that. But the idea that with identification and inner considering, for example, an analogy that came to my mind is glue. You know how if you put glue on your hand and you touch something, your hand sticks to the thing. And you could sort of use that as an analogy of identification. And then when you start to pull your hand away, the hand maybe comes away, but then there's still this glue between your hand and the object. And then even when you get your hand free, your hand's all sticky still. And you try to find something to wash it off, and that doesn't work. And so it's still sticky. And it's kind of like this with identification, or something like inner considering. Our hand is so stuck. And then when we try to unstick it, it's not a matter of just lifting our hand off. There's a lot of sticky stuff in there that we need to find a solvent for it, a certain type of soap or chemical. Or again, this is just an analogy, but what would it really mean for there to be no stickiness, no identification? And understanding what that is, identification is almost like a chemical agent in us. It's affecting our entire chemistry. The chemistry of our being is being affected, and we are becoming things. We are attaching ourselves to things as consciousness. Speaking from the perspective of consciousness, it's this thing we call consciousness or awareness. It's so powerful, so miraculous, because it can actually become something. It can become what it perceives, which is very peculiar. But what happens in our case is it does it at the expense of remaining conscious of itself. And the example of inner considering is just one of several of the major examples. But it's curious as to relation to other people. We're a human being. We're in this form of a human being, and we take it very seriously how we see and are received and perceived by other human beings. Animals don't do this. This is a psychological phenomenon particular to human beings. Rocks don't do it, trees, roses, weed grass, dogs, cats. They are afraid of one another. That's instinctive. They do not interconsider. It doesn't even exist. It's a purely psychological phenomenon for us where we get stuck. Our consciousness gets stuck in this psychological trap called internal considering.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm chuckling with the truth. Oh yeah, I've been resonating and walking and listening to direct path masters and or so-called self-professed masters. We don't know, you know, as well as I have friends on a direct path, and I was on a direct path. Not sure on what path I am now, but even when I was focused that direct path, I'm telling you, the direct path is gradual. It's not that anybody goes and hears the truth and bam, nobody. It's not like that. The direct path is that, hey, we are going directly to what you are and find out what you are. Yeah, that's the directness. We are going for the sun directly. We are not busy with the clouds and the weather and study the this or that. We are just going for the sun. However, that direct going, that's a methodology. Yeah, and then there are certain tools and techniques and investigations and stuff. We are going to take time. So it's gradual. Yeah. But coming back,
I would say,
yeah?
I was just going to say, to bring us back to being, what are some ways to see this that we could suggest to anyone who's listening?
Considering, to see inner considering.
Yeah, to see inner
Yeah.
considering and to feel it, and then to not necessarily try to get rid of it, but put something against it to make it more clear. I mentioned the example of trying to say something when maybe you feel uncomfortable about saying. Someone asks you something, Peter, would you like to, what do you, I know it, Peter, let's go down to the theater and see a movie. I'm inner considering, so I say, okay, but I don't want to, or I don't want to see that movie. Or is there something else I'd rather actually do that day? Why can't I say, Mihai, you know what? Thanks, but I don't like those kind of movies, or I don't want to see that, or I want to go, I got something else scheduled. It's a small example, but or when someone asks us our opinion, or here's another one. A lot of people, they can't wait to say what they think. And they're inner considering because they feel they must state their opinion. They must have the answer. They must be seen as the one in charge, and things like that. They're actually inner considering about that. And for those people to try not to respond first, give the floor to someone else, give the space to someone else, let someone else who's more passive by nature, give them a chance to manifest and be. But oftentimes, as I say, everybody's inner considering. Some people are taking all the space as a result. Some are taking no space as a result. Both parties could benefit from inching a little bit toward the other direction, just for the purpose of observation, and see what happens if I keep my mouth shut and let Joe give his opinion before I give mine. And how about this too? How about after Joe and Mary and John and Bill all give their opinions, I don't try to wrap up their opinions with my opinion and be the answer man. So little things, making ourselves slightly, putting ourselves in a situation where we know we're going to inner consider, or we know inner considering is preventing us This is another thing. We shut ourselves off. We close all these doors. We find ourselves in a narrow corridor psychologically because of inner considering. So what I'm suggesting is find one of these doors, just try to open it, put a foot through it, step in there and just notice what happens. Some people get very uncomfortable externally. And then other people, I say, if they want to give their opinion and they try not to, gets very uncomfortable internally. Like, it's like, I know the answer. I want, I have the best opinion and I need to state it. And watch what happens when you don't.
I guess practically what I would also recommend, apart from what Peter was saying, actually, I find that this thing to do something against the inner considering, like to stand up, be seen, stand up and speak when I feel like flushed and all that, I find that that's actually advanced. That's an advanced skill. I would go even early. I will just begin a lower level, just observing, hey, when I have to observe inner considering in me, just to observe it. When do I have it? In connection with which people? In what circumstances? And how does it feel? Yeah, study it in myself as it's happening. I can't do anything about it. I can't get out of it, but I can observe it. I can observe it. What kind of state is it? Where is it in the body? Where is the energy in the belly? Somehow, although it's happening and there's a tendency to suck us in it, try to observe it. Observe the creature as it is happening, or observe it after it has left. Also, what does it say? It has certain thought. And so first, just by observing it, one is a little bit less identified with it. Just by observing something, although I can't stop it. Yeah, that's the non-identification or de-identifying phases. They go is in different stages. Like something's happening, I'm identified with it. I don't even know, nothing I can do. One stage. Another stage is something comes, I'm getting identified with it, but I'm aware that I'm identified with it a little bit, but I can't stop it. Okay. Another stage will be like, I see it's coming and I can observe it a little bit. Awareness is aware of it. I'm observing a little bit and I still can't stop it. Yeah. And so we keep moving like this. You can see it coming, it's coming, and then I catch it early. And it doesn't take over my face. It doesn't take dwelling into the heart, as the Philokalia would say. So one can catch the thieves and robbers before they took hold of the heart. And, so the essence of all of this is to observe. And I would say that will be the beginning. As you get more used to it and you realize that, okay, it's not going to kill me. This energy is not going to kill me. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's a hot potato, but I can witness it. Then we can go a little bit against it. Like, let's say I'm a meeting, I know I do a lot of groups, and then some people, they are very interested in the subject, but they can't say anything because they're afraid they are going to be judged, or they think that they have nothing to say. At some point, it will be good for them to raise their hand and just say something. Even like hey, I'm very afraid to say anything. And here I am. And then observe this. And so that will be a nice breakthrough. And then keep playing out like that.
And another thing about this, Mihai, is that to notice whether we just are observing it or whether we try to push something against it a little bit to heighten it, to make it more visible to ourselves, is to notice the feeling of I that's behind it or in it, that it's wrapped around. There's a feeling of I am uncomfortable. And this is really what the fourth way is doing with this, is to show, in the end, our goal is, you could say, to no longer be identified with this feeling of I, this sense of I, this image of I inside, and we're imagining this is who we are, rather than consciousness recognizing itself as this formless being of consciousness. And so inner considering is one example of who is this I that is feeling uncomfortable, that's inner considering? It could be called I considering, as well as inner considering, but it's about identity. It's about identification. And we are stuck, all of us are stuck in our imaginary idea of who we think we are.
Yeah. It's interesting, Peter, that as a psychotherapist, and I'm aware that there are two types of psychotherapy, actually, or psychology. There is the regular psychology, psychology in sleep, at using psychology in order to feel better and to change certain unpleasantness in order to function. And then there's the psychotherapy, as Uspensky or Gurdjieff, like fourth way from one angle, is the psychology of man's possible evolution. Yes, so there's psychology of what's happening in our psychology and in our body, as we are trying to be more awake. So these are the psychology of awakening. Yeah, but either way, and we are going to talk more another time about this. I know we plan to have that. Oh yeah, so the thought I had was that there are some techniques and tools to make conscious that deep feeling of I. Who is that I that wants to be liked? What is that I that is afraid to be rejected? We are enslaved to that I and doing what that I says, and we don't even know it. So at some point we need to turn towards that and see it. And it's tricky because it's elusive. Actually, you can't find it, but there are ways you will find the sensation, and some memory or a feeling that consciousness is identified with, and by watching that more closely, then it loosens up. So that is just a sensation, is no longer me. It's a sensation of inner considering, and I am, awareness aware of it. So there are some little tricks, like using a little kind of dropping some inquiry statement, like when I feel a little bit of that, to close my eyes and to say something like, it's okay if they don't like me. It's totally okay if they don't like me. I don't mind. And then observe, and something will rise up. Well, no, I'm afraid. Somewhere in the body. Yeah. So there are ways we need to make it more conscious. To be free of it, we need to make it more conscious. Tricky part of inner considering is subconscious and driving behavior lurking in the background.
And another tricky part is that it is I in us that is inner considering. And what happens I loved how you distinguish between the two forms of psychology. I forget what you called it, the psychology of therapy maybe, and then the psychology of awakening. And so what will often happen, can easily happen, I should say, when we hear about this idea of inner considering is, I hears this idea. And then I think, I don't want to inner consider anymore. I will try not to inner consider. And it's the exact same phenomenon in us, in our psyche, in our ego, our imaginary idea of ourselves, which is now taking on this idea and trying not to inner consider. And what Mihai just described, where suddenly the space opens up and you start to see it as a sensation, and you realize, wait a minute, there actually is no I. It was imagined because we were identified with the sensation. And between our awareness and the sensation formed this sense of identity in us. And that's what identification means. It was right here. The sensation was stuck against our awareness, and we couldn't, it's me. I'm not going to, and then it starts to move away. And this is important to say, because we start to try not to inner consider from the very place in which we are inner considering. Sounds strange, but that's what we discover. And that's why people go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I inner consider so much. They're just starting to see it. It's starting to become visible in themselves. And then over time, what will start to become visible is this sense of I, who is inner considering. Now the sensation is here, and now the sense of I is moving away as well. And we're just left with clearer and clearer being of consciousness, of awareness, that's seeing all of this.
Yeah. You know, some people say, I don't care what people think of me. I really don't care. That usually is bullshit.
And that's I.
Yeah.
That's I that says that. And they're right. They actually don't feel anything. There's a name for that. We have a name for that in the fourth way. We'll talk about it another time.
Yeah.
I don't care. Things don't matter. People,
Yeah.
So what? So what? It doesn't matter, and I don't care. And a lot of people have this attitude, and that's I. That is not non-identification, although that will parade in us in the name of not being identified. But it's still actually identification with a sense of I being someone who doesn't care.
Yeah. Actually, my point was that is false. That's some level of the psyche. It has this like a strong puffed up thing as a reaction to something else, and at a deeper level, there is some of this identification with what other people think of us and doing this dance. I guess, where are we going with this? What I noticed is that if one is working consistently for a long time along these lines, it is from running a false personality I that is inner considering, and through observing, and also doing some areas I really believe that's necessary to kind of go deeper, and in some particular kind of way to go to the origin of that hurt or wound or fear of being oneself. One needs to go there, and I'm not going to go in depth about it. But through this, seeing these layers and layers and layers, they are going to diminish, and we are going to be more and more in our essence. And it's just like the puppy or the young child. Essence is under less laws. Essence is more naturally being more like spontaneous, and is less caring about really trying to morph to please other people, like a essence with a healthy dose of self-confidence coming from the real self, not false self-confidence. Then one is more free from it. And the gain is that I can live a life truer to my destiny, to the essence, to my mission, so I'm more happy, more at peace, less contrived, less rigid, less fearful, is more relaxed.
And it reminds me, Mihai, Gurdjieff said in the very beginning, all of the obstacles to awakening are in personality. So what we're talking about is a phenomenon of personality. Even if we have a so-called shy essence, the inner considering that gets embroidered around that is personality. And that becomes now the idea of a young child does not imagine itself as an identity in relation to other people. There's none of that yet. There's no psychological core of identity yet. It's just pure essence. And so what we are talking about is personality. And what you're talking about, Mihai, where are we going with this? When this starts to diminish of its own accord through as a result of observation and us being less and less identified with it, consciousness being less and less identified with it. Now, essence is, the shackles are off. The walls move away and fall down. And suddenly now there's a world out here that I'm in. I'm not just imagining myself and the world in relation to me. Now there's just the world, and I'm in it. I'm part of it. It's a different, freer, easier, less restricted and less fearful way of living. We talked about that earlier. Behind a lot of this inner considering, if you peel away all the layers, we're afraid. Something's in us is afraid.
Yeah, actually, to quote one of my past teachers, and because it fits here, like this psychotherapy in sleep, or psychology of sleep, basically one goes and doesn't explore at the level of awakening and it's more like one takes for granted the ego as the me. Hey, this is me, and now I'm trying to figure out me. But so the psychotherapy in sleep is trying to the ego of the psychotherapist and the ego of the client, they are trying to figure out the ego of the client to make that ego be happier and to be less stuck in a room full of stuff where I cannot move. Yeah. So regular psychotherapy is like creating a little bit of corridor in this room that I cannot move, so I can move a little bit. Yeah. But psychology of awakening, or psychology of man's possible evolution, is, hey, we want to dance, man. We want to dance in that room. We want to clear that furniture so we can dance and be free, not just to have a little corridor to just function, So that's the difference.
When we talked about inner considering, we did another session when we were introducing all the obstacles, I think, before we went into each one in particular. I mentioned some things that came from a man named Anthony DeMello, and I think it bears repeating here since we're focusing on inner considering, especially because we were talking about how can we see this in ourselves, this idea of inner considering, this manifestation. And he pointed out that normally, some ways you can see it is, one way you can see it is, we do something, we not necessarily want to do it, we inner consider about it, but we do it because it makes us feel good about ourselves, usually in terms of how we will be seen. It makes us feel good. An example would be if they come around at the office and say, you know what, Betsy in the department next door, she's retiring, and we're all contributing $10. And you don't know Betsy, but they're putting together some money, nice gift. She's retiring. Let's all buy her something. And you actually don't want to do it because you don't know her. Why should you give her your money? Whatever. But you do it because you think, that's great. And then you feel good. And so you do it. You actually don't want to do it, but you do it. That's inner considering. It doesn't mean you should not do it. There are reasons for doing it that are not inner considering, but to notice, did you really want to do it? Or did you do it just to feel good? The other thing we do, which Anthony DeMello pointed out, is we do it because if we do it, other people will feel good about us. They'll say, oh, look, they saw Peter. Peter freely gave his $10, readily gave his $10. What a wonderful guy. He's a good employee and a good guy, and he understands how this works. Good for Peter. I like Peter. He gives his money. Another reason, or another thing that causes us to act and that's inner considering too, right? Because I did it because then it made other people feel good about me, and which made me feel even better about myself than the first one. The third one is when we do something because we're afraid if we don't do it, other people will judge us for having not done it. So if I say, no, thank you, I don't know Betsy, or I don't have any cash on me right now, or I don't donate. I keep all my extra money for my daughter's college education. I'm going to put that $10 in her college fund. Thank you very much. But I don't do that because I do it because I'm afraid if I don't give the $10, other people will think I'm stingy or selfish or not a good team player, something like that. So these are interesting things to notice, little areas. Somebody makes a decision for the group. Other people go along. Not all of them want to, but they inner consider. and they do it for different reasons. And then people go along for different reasons. So just to try to see in oneself, what do I really feel here? And why am I feeling that way? And does this idea of inner considering help me cast more light on my psychology? And again, on the feeling of I, it's all about I. I feeling good, how other people perceive me, quote unquote me. And it all revolves around this sense of identity, internal considering. And again, to point out, it's all internal. It has nothing to do actually with other people, with who sees you give the money or not. It's all going on in our imagination inside of ourselves.
Yeah. It's some kind of slavery. Then there's innocence and some kind of hurt or woundedness or being programmed initially.
That you should. It's often should.
Yeah.
You should do this. You ought to do this. It's right to do this. It would be wrong if you didn't do this. And so this is all comes back to inner considering.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on this. There is this form of like a should and shouldn't, which I would call some kind of local, temporal, societal conditioning of how we should be. Yeah, this is very strong, guys. Very strong. And it's temporal and geographical. It changes. 200 years was different. 50 years ago was different. 600 years ago was different. In Iran is different than in Northern California here where I'm at. And so there's like how it should be, the unspoken moral code, or even a clearly defined moral code, which comes from some religion frozen in time. Yeah, so that is actually, as part of awakening, we need to free ourselves from that to become a free radical. Really, that is going to get us sick. That kind
not just a radical, yes, a free radical in the chemical sense, you mean, right?
A free radical.
Yes,
that we are free from that. It doesn't mean we're antisocial. It doesn't mean that we are becoming an asshole. We are becoming like a criminal or something. Actually, the more we do this work, we free ourselves from this fake morality, fake how I should be. And then I am aligned more like with my essence and what feels right. At the same time, there is the conscience now. There is like a universal sense of what's right or wrong based on a seeing then others are me and we are all one. We are children of the same family, you know, so don't do unto others what you don't want to be done unto you. And there comes I am in a certain way, I'm loving and supportive and kind, not because I should or because I have to or because some church said, but because it comes from within. It comes from the heart, the awakened heart, so to say. You know, and it doesn't have to be kind and loving and supportive all the time. From the awakened heart comes that I see that this guy actually is dangerous and is tricking me, and I'm going to be really firm with this guy so he never talks to me again. That, you see, that's circumstantial ethics. It's not frozen as should all the time.